The cold stars of deep space stretched out like a black ocean. In the orbit of a shattered moon, a lonely human ship drifted without light. The ship's name was Vigilant Dawn. Once it had been a proud patrol frigate. Now it was silent, covered in thick layers of gray dust from the broken moon. To anyone passing by, it looked like nothing more than dead metal. Inside the ship, the lights were dark, the system sleeping, and only one living human remained. Lieutenant Marcus Hale. Marcus was inside a cryosleep chamber in the medical bay. Frost covered the transparent glass of the pod. He looked peaceful, almost like a statue made of ice. His brown hair was frozen against his forehead. His strong arms were crossed over his chest. For 6 months he had been in cryosleep, protecting something far more valuable than himself. Next to his pod was a black titanium case locked with 7 security codes. Inside was the Athena Core, a tactical AI program that could give humanity a fighting chance in the ongoing war. If the enemy found it, everything could be lost. Far away in the blackness, something moved. A Kareth raider cruiser slid out of warp space. Its hull was sharp and curved like the skeleton of a giant insect. Green energy lines pulsed across it like veins. On the bridge of the cruiser, Captain Vryn Kareth watched the silent human ship on his scanner. His gray reptilian skin shined in the light of his control panel. "Another dead human ship," hissed Vryn. "Easy salvage." The Kareth Dominion hated humanity, but they loved scavenging their technology. Vryn's crew was made of fast and cruel raiders. They had destroyed colonies, ambushed convoys, and collected human scrap like hunters gutting prey. But this time, something was different. The ship's power signature was too low, too quiet. Vryn narrowed his slit-like eyes. "No distress beacon. No defenses," he said softly. "Board it. Take everything." 2 raider dropships separated from the cruiser and drifted toward the Vigilant Dawn. Their engines made no sound in the vacuum. Mechanical arms latched onto the hull. Metal groaned softly as the aliens cut through the human airlock like claws through flesh. Inside the Vigilant Dawn, the security systems detected movement. Silent alerts blinked on old monitors in the dark control room. The ship's AI, an old emergency intelligence named L09, stirred. It was not fully awake, but it understood danger. Unauthorized entry detected. The AI activated internal thermal sensors. It counted 12 life forms, all alien. Their heat signatures were spread out. Moving toward the central corridor, L09's logic tree was limited. It could not fight back alone, but it could protect Marcus. It diverted all remaining power to the cryosleep bay's emergency shield. Then it sent a whisper into deep space, a distress signal in encrypted human code. It was weak, but enough to reach someone. Maybe. In the cryosleep pod, Marcus didn't know any of this. His heart beat only twice per minute. His lungs moved slowly, but a red light above his pod began to flash. The aliens entered the corridor like a pack of wolves. They were tall with hard scales and glowing yellow eyes. Their breathing was dry and sharp like sand on metal. They carried plasma rifles and wore black armor with jagged edges. Their boots made a hollow echo on the metal floor. The leader, Scar, pressed a small button on his wrist. A green scanner light spread across the corridor. "Empty," Scar growled. "Humans are weak. They abandoned their ships like cowards." But another raider, smaller and smarter, looked at the data on his wrist pad. "No," he said. "There is something alive in the med bay. One human." Scar's grin stretched across his scaled face. "Then we will have fun." The med bay doors were locked. The raiders cut through them easily. Sparks danced across the floor. Behind the door, the cryosleep pod shined softly in the dark. Frost covered the entire room. Marcus lay inside, still frozen, unaware of the danger. "He sleeps," Scar whispered. So exposed. So helpless. The raiders laughed. A cold, metallic sound. But they didn't know what they had just stepped into. The AI L09 rerouted air pressure in the corridor. A silent mechanism clicked into place. Thin wires connected to the floor. Not for security, but for traps left behind months ago by the crew. Vigilant Dawn had been prepared to die fighting. The aliens ignored the blinking panel near the ceiling. It flashed once, then went dark again. They thought it was broken. On the bridge, Vryn watched the boarding feed. "Do not damage the brain," he hissed. "Human AI is valuable." His second-in-command, a tall Kareth with a long scar down his jaw, spoke cautiously. "Captain, no other ships in this sector, but the human distress signal might travel far." Vryn smirked. No one will come. Humans are weak, and one human alone is nothing. Meanwhile, L09 unlocked the pod's thawing sequence. Warm air slowly filled the chamber. Frost cracked like thin glass. Marcus's eyelids moved. His fingers twitched. Inside his mind, memories rushed back. The ambush 6 months ago, the death of his crew, his promise to protect the Athena core. The pod opened with a hiss. Marcus sat up, coughing, breathing fast. The cold bit his skin. He touched the black titanium case next to the pod, still locked. He heard footsteps outside the medbay. Heavy, slow, not human. Not good, he whispered. Marcus moved quickly despite the freezing ache in his muscles. He grabbed a maintenance wrench from the wall. It wasn't a weapon, but it was something. He checked the medbay door. The lock was cut through. Aliens were coming. He crouched behind the cryopod, forcing his breathing to slow. The raiders entered the medbay. Their yellow eyes glowed in the dim light. Scar raised his plasma rifle and laughed when he saw Marcus standing there with a wrench. Pathetic. Marcus didn't reply. He didn't need to. He knew the ship better than they did. The AI sent him a text message on a small emergency wrist screen. Traps ready. Corridor lockdown in 5 sec. Marcus tapped twice in reply. Do it. The raiders stepped forward. One of them touched the titanium case. The floor exploded. Not with fire, with compressed gas and shrapnel from old maintenance tools. 2 aliens fell instantly. Armor cracked, blood hissing in the cold air. The rest screamed in their harsh language. Marcus used the chaos to roll under a table and press a hidden panel on the wall. A steel blast door slammed shut behind the aliens, locking them in with him. You picked the wrong ghost ship, Marcus muttered. Back on the cruiser, Vryn frowned. What is happening? Sir, the second said. We've lost 2 signals. Vryn slammed a clawed fist on the console. He was asleep. But Marcus was no ordinary survivor. He had been part of Ghost Division. Soldiers trained to survive in dead ships, to fight in silence, to make the enemy believe they were dealing with a monster. Now alone and half frozen, he had no choice but to be that monster. The aliens fired plasma bolts at the medbay walls. Marcus threw a small EMP grenade, a standard maintenance tool modified into a weapon. The lights flickered, systems screamed, and their rifles jammed. He ran past them like a shadow, sliding into the next corridor. The AI sealed the medbay door behind him. The aliens were trapped inside. Distress signal sent. 2% power left. Hostiles 10 remaining. Suggestion, guerrilla defense. Marcus smiled. Even half dead, even alone, humanity was dangerous. He moved silently through the ship, setting traps as he went. Loose floor panels, pressure mines, doors rigged to seal. His body ached, but his mind was sharp. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the thrill of the hunt. The Kareth thought they had found prey. But they had walked into the den of a predator. Vryn's cruiser sent a command to break the ship's hull and drag it back. But something strange happened. The human ship's engines, long thought dead, suddenly powered on just enough to spin. Slowly, like a sleeping giant turning in its bed, the cruiser's grappling hook strained. He's trying to break free, the scarred second officer growled. Impossible, Vryn said. One human cannot, he stopped. On the monitor, internal cameras showed the human soldier moving through the ship like a ghost, taking down one raider at a time. No loud gunfire, no heroic speeches, just cold, efficient survival. This is no ordinary human, the officer whispered. Back in the lower decks, Marcus crouched next to a maintenance shaft. He listened. 2 aliens were searching the corridor ahead. He picked up a loose pipe, threw it down a different hall, and waited. When they turned, he leapt. One hit the floor with a crushed throat. The other screamed and fired blindly, hitting his own ally. Marcus didn't feel pride, just focus. He had one mission: protect the Athena core. In space, the distress signal traveled further and further. Somewhere in the black, human forces might hear it, but they were hours away at best. Marcus knew no help was coming soon, and yet he was not afraid, because he had something the Kareth didn't understand. Humans were fragile, yes, but when cornered, they became something else. Entirely predators, by the time the Kareth realized they weren't. Hunting, they were being hunted. 6 of their raiders were already dead. Marcus stood near the command deck entrance, breathing hard but steady. His wrench was bloody. His wrist screen blinked softly. Enemies 6 eliminated. remaining fort or power 1%. He wiped sweat and frost from his forehead. "All right," he whispered. "Let's finish this." Outside, the Kareth cruiser charged its tractor beam. Vryn's anger burned. "Burn the ship, kill him." "I want the core." But deep inside the vigilant Dawn, Marcus was ready. He was no longer a sleeping soldier. He was awake, and they didn't see humanity coming. The metal floor of the vigilant Dawn was covered in black scorch marks and pieces of alien armor. The emergency lights blinked in red and yellow, painting the corridors with a soft but dangerous glow. Smoke drifted slowly toward the ventilation ducts. Marcus Hale crouched behind a sealed blast door, breathing deeply. Frost still clung to his skin, but the sharp cold no longer slowed him. His muscles ached from cryosleep, but his mind was awake, sharper than ever. On his wrist screen, the AI flashed short. Simple messages. Hostiles 4 remaining. Power 1%. Reinforcements. ETA unknown. Marcus exhaled slowly. 4 of them left, he thought. 4 against 1. But he had already killed more than that. The Kareth thought humans were soft, weak, but they didn't know what humans became when they had nothing left to lose. He touched the cold wall next to him and whispered softly, "Let's finish this." Inside the medbay, the surviving raiders were shouting in their guttural language. Scar, the leader of the boarding party, was furious. He slammed his clawed fist against a broken cryopod. "He is only one." Scar roared, "Why do you fear him?" But fear was exactly what had started to grow. The Kareth were hunters. They were used to screaming prey, easy kills, burning colonies. But this ship was different. It was silent, cold, full of shadows and traps. And the human was like a ghost, moving without sound, striking without warning. Scar lifted his plasma rifle and checked the power. 3 of his soldiers stood with him. Their armor was scratched. 2 of them bled from shrapnel wounds. None of them laughed now. "We finish this," Scar growled. "Now." On the cruiser, Captain Vryn paced across the bridge. His sharp tail scraped the floor. "Status?" he hissed. The scarred second officer lowered his head. We lost contact with the lower deck team. 6 dead, 4 left. 1 human," Vryn roared. His voice echoed through the bridge. "You tell me 1 frozen human is killing Kareth warriors?" The officer swallowed nervously. "This human is trained, Captain. Maybe military." Vryn stared at the drifting human ship on the screen. Its engines were barely alive, but its defense systems were unpredictable. He had already tried to use the tractor beam. The ship resisted, spinning just enough to keep them from getting full control. "Then we burn him," Vryn whispered. "No more games." He ordered the cruiser's plasma cannons to lock onto the ship's engines. But before he could give the final fire order, an alert flashed on his screen. Human distress signal detected. Source, unknown destination. Vryn hissed loudly. If the humans heard the signal, reinforcements could arrive. And that meant trouble. "Find him," Vryn said. "Now." Marcus moved through the maintenance tunnels. The pipes above him dripped cold water. The air smelled like metal and ozone. His footsteps were soft, practiced. Every sound echoed faintly in the empty ship. He stopped at a junction, listening. From above, he could hear the thud of alien boots, 4 of them. Close. They were searching deck by deck. Marcus tapped his wrist screen. Vent door. Access approved. The vent above the aliens opened silently, releasing a soft hiss of gas. A mixture of coolant and oxygen, invisible, freezing cold. One of the aliens coughed, confused. Another cursed. Marcus waited 10 seconds, then dropped silently from the vent behind them. His first strike was fast. A hard swing of the wrench into the back of a raider's neck. Armor cracked. The alien fell. The second turned, roaring, but Marcus ducked under the plasma bolt and swept his legs out from under him. In the freezing gas, the aliens moved slower. Marcus didn't. The corridor became a blur of movement. One alien fired wildly, hitting his own ally. Another screamed as Marcus slammed his wrench into its throat. Scar heard the noise from down the corridor. He ran toward the sound, plasma rifle ready. When he turned the corner, he saw 2 of his soldiers already on the floor, and the human, standing in the smoke like a ghost. Scar lifted his plasma rifle and fired. Marcus dove behind a bulkhead as green energy bolts burned through the air, hitting pipes and walls. Steam exploded around them. "You die here, human," Scar shouted. Marcus didn't answer. He pulled a small EMP charge from his belt, the last one he had. He pressed the button and tossed it into the steam. The blast was silent but bright. Scar's rifle died in his hands. He cursed in his language, threw the gun away, and pulled out a blade, a long, curved weapon that glowed faintly. "No more hiding," Scar hissed. "Fight me." Marcus had no blade, only his wrench. He smiled grimly. Fine. They charged at each other. The fight was brutal and fast. Scar was larger and stronger, his claws sharp, his armor thick. Marcus was fast and precise, moving like water through the narrow corridor. Scar swung, Marcus ducked. Marcus struck, Scar blocked. Sparks flew as metal hit armor again and again. Scar slammed Marcus into the wall. Pain shot through Marcus's back, but he didn't stop. He hit Scar's arm with the wrench once, twice, 3 times, until the alien roared in pain. Then Marcus dropped low and kicked the back of Scar's knee. The alien fell hard. Marcus hit him across the head with all his strength. Scar's blade clattered to the floor. The alien groaned, blood dripping from his mouth. "Not so fun now, huh?" Marcus muttered. But before he could finish the fight, Scar pressed a button on his belt. A high-pitched alarm echoed through the ship. "Alert, remaining raiders regrouping." He called his friends, Marcus whispered. He grabbed the blade from the floor and ran. On the bridge of the Kareth cruiser, Vryn saw the signal. "Good," he hissed. "Trap him. End this." The last 2 raiders rushed toward Scar's position. They were heavily armed, carrying plasma rifles and grenades, but Marcus wasn't running aimlessly. He moved toward the command deck of the Vigilant Dawn. The AI had a plan. Main weapon systems offline, self-destruct core standby. Docking bay open. "You're serious?" Marcus whispered. Yes, the AI's message was short, cold, and clear. Marcus understood. If he couldn't save the ship, he could at least take the enemy with him. He reached the control room and began locking down all doors except one, the one leading the raiders. Straight toward him, Scar limped down the corridor with blood dripping down his armor. Rage burned in his yellow eyes. The 2 surviving raiders followed him closely. "He will die here," Scar growled. "I will tear him apart." They reached the command deck door. It was open, too open, a bad sign. Inside, Marcus stood at the far end of the room next to the captain's chair. His hands were covered in grease and blood. In one hand he held the stolen alien blade. In the other, a detonator connected to the ship's main reactor. "Welcome to my ship," he said. The 3 raiders charged. Plasma bolts burned through the air. Marcus threw himself behind a console. Metal exploded around him. He rolled, slashing the first raider across the chest with the blade. It fell, screaming. The second raider fired at close range, but Marcus used the dead alien as a shield, then kicked the rifle out of the attacker's hands. He stabbed once, fast and hard. Only Scar remained. "I will break you," Scar spat. "Get in line," Marcus replied. They clashed again, blade against claw. Sparks flew. The deck lights flickered. Outside, the Kareth cruiser's cannons locked on target. Vryn's voice came through the raider's communicator. "End this, Scar, or I burn you all with the human." But Scar wasn't listening. He roared and charged. Marcus met him head on. This time Marcus didn't back away. He twisted under Scar's swing and drove the blade up through the alien's chest. Scar gasped, clawing at the wound. His yellow eyes went wide. He dropped to his knees. Marcus stood over him, breathing hard. "You should have let me sleep," Marcus said softly. Scar fell forward and didn't move again. On the cruiser bridge, Vryn froze. "Scar is dead," the officer whispered. Vryn slammed his claw into the console. "Then I'll kill the human myself." He raised his hand to fire the cruiser's plasma cannons, but at that exact moment, the Vigilant Dawn's lights turned red. Alarms screamed through every deck. Self-destruct sequence initiated. 2 minutes to reactor meltdown. Marcus had pressed the detonator. He walked to the captain's chair, breathing slowly. His body ached. His hands trembled from the fight. But his eyes were calm. He tapped the wrist screen. Athena core safe. Escape pods functional. Docking bay clear. "Good girl," he whispered to the AI. "Let's go home." He ran down the corridor toward the escape pods. Behind him, the reactor began to glow white-hot. The walls trembled. The Kareth cruiser moved closer, trying to grapple the ship. Vryn shouted, "Boarding team is dead. Kill him before he escapes." But it was too late. Marcus jumped into the escape pod and slammed the hatch closed. The pod detached with a metallic thunk, shooting away from the ship like a bullet. Through the small window, Marcus looked back at the vigilant dawn. The ship that had once been his home was now a bomb. He whispered softly, "Rest easy." The Kareth cruiser tried to pull away, but too late. The vigilant dawn exploded. A white flash spread across the black void, swallowing half the cruiser in a fireball. Metal screamed and cracked. The Kareth ship spun out of control, its engines burning. Inside the pod, Marcus shielded his eyes from the bright light. "Enemy damage critical. Distress signal transmitted. Reinforcements inbound." Hours later, the escape pod floated silently. Marcus lay against the seat, exhausted but alive. His knuckles were raw, his breath slow and steady. The AI's soft voice echoed in the small cabin. The escape pod floated silently through the endless black of space. The stars outside shone like cold diamonds, and behind it, the burning remains of the vigilant dawn still glowed faintly. Shattered pieces of metal drifted like silver snow. The Kareth cruiser lay in ruins, its hull cracked open, leaking fire and smoke into the vacuum. Inside the pod, Marcus Hale sat strapped into the pilot's seat. His face was pale, his hair still frosted from cryo-sleep. His hands were bruised, his uniform torn and stained, but his eyes were steady. The soft beeping of the pod's console echoed through the small space. Distress signal active. Human reinforcements ETA, P22-16. The AI voice was calm, almost gentle. Marcus leaned his head back and let out a slow breath. He was alive. He had kept the Athena core safe, and he had taken a Kareth warship down in the process. He closed his eyes for a moment. His body begged for rest, but his mind stayed sharp. He had been trained to stay awake when others would collapse, because in war, the moment you let your guard down is the moment you die. Outside the pod, the Kareth cruiser flickered weakly. Its engines were dead, but not everyone aboard was. Marcus knew Vryn, their captain, might still be alive. And Kareth captains didn't give up. On the bridge of the ruined cruiser, Captain Vryn sat on the floor with smoke swirling around him. Half of his control room was destroyed. His officers were either dead or silent. Sparks jumped from broken panels like angry fireflies. Vryn's gray-scaled face twisted with rage. "One human," he growled. "One." He coughed and forced himself to his feet. The glass of the observation window was cracked, showing the endless stars outside. The human frigate had exploded with a force no Kareth raider expected. It had ripped through the cruiser's shields like paper. Vryn's claws clenched. His honor had been burned, and his crew had been humiliated. "Send the hunters," he ordered. A few surviving Kareth soldiers on the lower deck answered weakly. 3 ships, small interceptor drones, detached from the cruiser, their engines glowing green. They turned toward the small escape pod drifting through the darkness. Vryn smiled coldly. He will not reach his fleet alive. Marcus sat upright when the radar began to beep. The pod's display showed 3 green dots moving fast. "Of course," he whispered. "You're not done. Threat detected. Interceptor speed high. Defense system limited. The pod was not made for fighting. It was a lifeboat. No heavy guns. No strong shields. But Marcus didn't need guns to survive. He needed his brain." "L09, Marcus said softly to the AI. "Give me manual control." Manual mode engaged. Marcus grabbed the flight stick. His fingers were shaking from exhaustion, but his eyes were focused. He angled the pod toward a dense asteroid field nearby. If the Kareth wanted to chase him, they'd have to do it in dangerous territory. The 3 interceptors rushed forward like arrows. They were fast, small, and deadly. Plasma bolts cut through the blackness. Marcus jerked the flight stick, rolling the pod to the side. Bright green energy burned past the window. The pod shook. Warning lights flashed. Marcus gritted his teeth and pushed the thrusters to maximum. The escape pod dived straight into the asteroid field. Chunks of rock spun around him. Some were the size of cars, some the size of cities. The pod weaved between them, bouncing light off their icy surfaces. "Come on," Marcus whispered. "Follow me." They did. The interceptors followed closely, their glowing engines slicing through the dark. Plasma fire cracked like thunder. One shot grazed the pod's wing, sending it spinning for a second. Marcus bit his lip, forcing the pod steady again. Hull damage 12%. Reinforcements ATA 00.1840, 18 minutes. All he needed was to survive 18 more minutes. Back on the Kareth cruiser, Vryn watched the chase on his cracked screen. "Run, human. Run," he hissed. He didn't realize he was watching his own defeat unfold. Marcus twisted the pod into a narrow gap between two large spinning asteroids. The interceptors followed, firing. One of them clipped a rock and exploded in a silent burst of green light. Hostiles remaining. Marcus smiled faintly. One down, the other two closed in, smarter now. They began to fly in a formation, one chasing directly behind, the other trying to flank him. The pod wasn't fast enough to outrun them, but speed wasn't Marcus's plan. "Time for something stupid," he muttered. He angled the pod sharply upward, shooting toward a tall spire of rock. At the last moment, he killed the thrusters. The pod drifted silently, becoming part of the asteroid shadows. The interceptors rushed past, confused. Marcus restarted the engines and slammed the pod into their blind spot. He triggered the emergency flare system, normally used to signal rescuers. This time it became a weapon. A burst of white-hot magnesium light blinded the nearest interceptor. It crashed into a rock and shattered into a fireball. Hostiles remaining, 1. 2 down, Marcus whispered. The last interceptor came for him with rage. Plasma bolts tore through the darkness. One shot hit the pod's side hard. Alarms screamed. Hull damage 46%. Warning, fuel low. Marcus wiped blood from his forehead. A piece of shrapnel had grazed his temple. He ignored it. He locked the pod's rotation toward a narrow asteroid tunnel. It was small and too small for two ships side by side. He entered at full speed. The interceptor followed. The tunnel was a maze of jagged rock. Marcus twisted the pod, barely avoiding collisions. The alien ship behind him fired constantly, lighting up the tunnel with green light. Dust and fragments exploded around him. Thrusters at 80%. Time to exit. Euro 2, bar 15, Marcus smiled weakly. Almost. At the end of the tunnel, he spotted a sharp bend and a natural trap. He pulled the flight stick hard left at the last second. The pod skimmed the rock with a loud screech, but made it through. The interceptor tried the same. Move. And failed. It slammed into the wall in a burst of green light. The explosion lit up the asteroid field like a supernova. Hostiles eliminated. Reinforcements ETA, 012 and 09. Marcus leaned back, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. His whole body hurt. But he had done it. He had outflown 3 alien interceptors in a pod built for escape, not combat. "And they call us weak," he whispered. On the Kareth cruiser, Vryn roared and smashed a console with his claws. Sparks rained down around him. "Enough!" he shouted. "Prepare the main cannon," his officer stammered. "Captain, the cannon is damaged. We lost the main grid when the frigate exploded." Vryn glared at him. He knew it was over. But pride burned inside him like fire. "If I die, I take the human with me," he growled. He ordered what remained of the ship to charge toward the pod at full speed. Even half dead, the cruiser was still huge. If it collided with Marcus's pod, both would be destroyed. Marcus saw the massive shadow of the Kareth cruiser turning toward him on the radar. It was coming fast, like a wounded animal still ready to bite. Cruiser course, collision, wall low. Escape options limited. Marcus stared at the screen for a moment. He could run, but the pod wouldn't be fast enough to escape the blast. The only option left was to fight smart. One last trick. He opened the pod's panel and pulled out the black titanium case, the Athena core. Its surface was cold and smooth. Inside was the AI that could change the war. He smiled tiredly. "All right, Athena, let's wake up." The Athena core activated with a low hum. A new voice spoke, not cold and robotic like the old emergency AI. This one was sharp, strong, and confident. "Tactical core online. Hello, Lieutenant Hale." "Hello, Athena," Marcus whispered. "I need one last miracle." Of course, the Athena core connected to the pod systems, rewriting protocols in seconds. The tiny pod suddenly became smarter. Faster at calculating, sharper at aiming, quicker at reacting. Athena scanned the damaged cruiser and found its weak point, the cracked reactor line near the starboard side. "One shot, Lieutenant. Angle 34 degrees, timing 5.2 seconds before collision." Marcus tightened his grip on the controls. The cruiser grew larger and larger on the screen. His heart pounded. His pod shook. Warning lights screamed. "Let's show them," he whispered. At the last second, Marcus fired the pod's emergency engine, not away but straight toward the cruiser. Vryn laughed when he saw the pod charging toward him. "He's mad," Vryn hissed. Marcus angled the pod exactly where Athena had told him. When he reached the right spot, he ejected the emergency fuel cell, a dangerous, unstable cylinder. It flew like a comet toward the cracked reactor line. Athena's countdown hit 0. The cell exploded. The blast hit the cruiser's starboard side like a hammer. Flames erupted across the ship. Systems died. The collision never happened. Instead, the cruiser spun out of control, breaking apart piece by piece. On the bridge, Vryn's last roar of rage was lost in the fire. Marcus's pod spun violently from the blast. He struggled to steady it. Alarms screamed, but the pod held together. Enemy cruiser destroyed. Reinforcements ATA 00431, he laughed weakly. I can't believe that worked. Outside, the last of the Kareth cruiser burned in silence. 1 human, 1 pod. 1 ship destroyed. 4 minutes later, 3 large human warships dropped out of warp space. Their hulls gleamed silver against the stars. The lead ship was the Iron Will, a heavy battle cruiser. "This is Iron Will to escape pod. Identify," a voice came through the radio. Marcus pressed the comm button. "Lieutenant Marcus Hale, Vigilant.